My ex invited me to his wedding just to flaunt his rich new fiancée, but let's just say, he didn't expect my +1 to flip the whole thing on its head. But to get to that, I need to tell you everything from the beginning. So, Logan and I met back when we were both working part-time at Starbucks. I was 21, still juggling classes and trying to stash enough cash to move out of my parents' place for good. Logan, who was 31 at the time, was doing everything he could to pay down his mountain of student loans. His situation was rough. His parents were buried in gambling debts and couldn't help him out at all. In the beginning, we connected just talking about our messed up family stuff, but after a while, we realized we genuinely liked each other's company. 2 years later, after I graduated, I finally had enough saved up to get my own place. Meanwhile, Logan was still stuck living at his parents' house, fighting to stay afloat with his loans. I felt bad, so I told him he could move in with me. Problem was, he couldn't afford half the rent. Not even close. So I offered to take on 75% of it, and he'd only need to cover the remaining 25%. He jumped at that deal. As for the bills, we split those down the middle. We worked different jobs too. His required long, physical hours on site, while mine was a more chill corporate gig. My boss honestly didn't care where we worked from as long as we hit our monthly goals, so I usually worked from home. Because Logan was constantly wiped out from work, he rarely helped with anything at home. So I took care of almost everything: the cleaning, the laundry, the meals, the dishes, you name it. And I didn't complain, at least not at first, because I knew how tiring his job was. Still, I asked him to handle one small thing: the trash. He was always the last one to eat anyway, so it made sense. But no matter how many times I reminded him, he'd forget. Every single time. And guess who ended up dragging the garbage out every morning before work? There was this one weekend, I had to head into the office, and when I got back home, I was hit with a disaster zone. The kitchen counters were buried in dirty dishes, empty food containers, and candy wrappers. Laundry was overflowing. Trash untouched. It looked like a tornado tore through the place. I was beyond frustrated. After a long day, all I wanted was to kick back and relax, but the mess made that impossible. So, instead of resting, I spent the rest of the day scrubbing and cleaning everything, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd notice. Later that night, Logan came home, gave me a quick hug, told me he missed me, and then plopped himself on the couch to watch his game. Didn't say a word about the clean apartment. I just broke down. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the lack of sleep, or maybe it was finally realizing how little he valued what I did. I started crying. He glanced over and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired and heading to bed. Before going, I gave him the usual reminder: don't forget to take out the trash. He nodded. You already know how this ends. The next morning, the trash was still sitting there. When he strolled into the kitchen and casually asked what was for breakfast, I snapped. I told him if he wanted food, he could make it himself. He looked confused and called me rude. That's when I lost it. I started yelling about how useless he was around the house. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language and told me I was being dramatic. Trying to keep calm, I asked him straight up, "Why don't you ever take the trash out?" He gave me the same tired excuse: I forgot. So then I hit him with the real question. Besides sitting on the couch with a beer every night, what exactly do you contribute to this house? He started in with the usual, how he's always exhausted after work and deserves some downtime. I said, sure, I'd get that. But what about me? I reminded him that I also worked full-time and came home just to cook for both of us, clean, wash, and iron his clothes, all while he did nothing. And all I ever asked for was help with the trash. Then he said something that really got to me. He told me he never asked me to do any of those things, and that, as his girlfriend, I should have just known to support him. He even said it wasn't a big deal. His mom did the same stuff for his dad. That's when I saw it for what it was. I was doing everything for a man who saw me more as a stand-in mom than an equal partner. and we weren't even married. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm done. I'm not doing anything else around here for you." I told him I wasn't his mother, I was his girlfriend, and this relationship was supposed to be a partnership. From now on, he'd have to cook his own meals, do his own laundry, iron his own shirts, and take care of his own mess. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand and stopped him cold. I added that things were changing. He was either going to start paying 50% of the rent like an adult, or he needed to find somewhere else to live. He looked stunned and asked where all of this was coming from. I told him the truth. I was done feeling like a maid in my own home. I deserved better. He wanted to keep talking, but I was already out the door and heading to work. And for once, I didn't feel guilty for putting myself first. After that, I stuck to my word. I cleaned up only after myself and didn't lift a finger for him. Watching him scramble in the mornings, looking for clean clothes or trying to iron his wrinkled shirts, was honestly a little satisfying. He still refused to do the dishes or take out the trash, thinking I'd cave eventually. But I didn't. I started eating takeout just so I wouldn't have to touch the nasty kitchen. I threw out my containers right after eating and kept to my corner of the apartment. He kept trying to guilt-trip me, saying I should take care of him if I was a good partner. But I held my ground. I wasn't going back. When rent was due, I sent in my half directly to our landlord and let her know that Logan would be covering the other 50%. He tried storming back into the apartment, raising his voice and demanding that I go back to paying 75% like before. But I stood firm. I reminded him how he never once showed appreciation when I was covering most of the cost. That chapter was closed. I wasn't going to keep carrying him. He threw out a bunch of excuses, trying to weasel out of it, but in the end, he had no choice but to pay his share to the landlord. Not once during all of this did he apologize. He never sat me down to say he was sorry or even acknowledged how much I used to do around the apartment. It honestly hurt, more than I expected, that he couldn't admit I had a point. Looking back, I regret not seeing his true colors earlier. Over the next few months, things only got worse. Every little argument turned into a full-blown fight. He'd twist things around and try to make me feel guilty, gaslighting me into thinking I was the one who had changed. Then I got promoted at work, and that seemed to be his breaking point. Apparently, one of our mutual friends, who also happened to be a coworker, let it slip to him. That night, Logan came stumbling into the apartment completely drunk. He woke me up, shouting that we needed to talk. Still half asleep, I could tell right away he was hungover from partying with that same group of friends. I told him we could talk in the morning when we were both clear-headed, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept insisting that it was something I needed to hear right then and there. So I sat up, groggy and irritated, just wanting to get it over with. I asked him what could possibly be so urgent that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night. That's when he blurted out, slurring his words, that he'd met someone else at work. I already knew who he was talking about. Her name was Sierra. I'd seen her once at one of his office parties when he dragged me along. She was clearly very young, probably in her early 20s, and came from serious money. Her dad was some big industrialist, and from what I heard, she only worked because he insisted she get some real-world experience. Logan went on and on about how he was falling for her. Said she was what he called a real woman, unlike me. I just sat there, staring at him. Strangely, I didn't even feel sad. Not even a little. If anything, I felt numb. Like the emotional connection between us had already died months ago. Truthfully, we'd been living more like roommates than anything else. He kept rambling about how great this new relationship was going to be, and that's when I cut him off. I told him I wasn't upset. In fact, I was glad he found someone else. I suggested we just end things peacefully and that he could start looking for a new place. He looked stunned. Brow furrowed, he asked me if I was jealous of Sierra. I actually laughed. I shook my head and told him that I felt relieved. Him finding someone else made it easier for me to walk away without guilt. That seemed to really set him off. His face twisted in anger, and he snapped, asking if my recent promotion had gone to my head. I told him flat out that the promotion had nothing to do with this. I'd been feeling the disconnect between us for months. We'd stopped being a couple a long time ago, and I understood why he might be drawn to someone else. I was even okay with that. You'd think that would have made things easier, but instead, he lost it. He started yelling that he was sick of women like me, modern women who chase careers and act like they don't need anyone. He started singing Sierra's praises again, talking about how she didn't care about her job and just wanted to get married and raise a family. Through all the noise, I stayed calm. I told him that every woman has her own dreams and priorities. Sierra came from wealth and could afford to see work as optional. But I enjoyed my career. I worked hard to build it, and I wasn't going to feel bad about that. I told him if that's the kind of partner he wanted, someone like Sierra, then he should absolutely be with her. There was no need for us to keep going in circles. I finished by telling him to move out as soon as he could. He stared at me in disbelief and finally asked, "How are you going to pay rent on your own?" I let him know I'd gotten a raise along with the promotion, and I could easily cover the full rent by myself. I didn't need a roommate anymore. That really pushed his buttons. He started shouting again, accusing me of trying to rub it in. He said Sierra was richer anyway, and she even had her own house, bought by her dad. He just kept going, shouting about how I needed to change, how I should be more obedient, more easy to live with. Then, with this nasty smirk, he said that deep down, all men wanted a housewife, not some ambitious woman who earned more than them. That was it for me. I told him to shut it. I was beyond tired of fighting with him in the middle of the night like we were on some reality show. I looked him dead in the eye and told him he had until the end of the month to get out, and until then, he could sleep on the couch. He muttered under his breath as I walked away, but I ignored the noise and went straight to bed. Over the next week, I watched him slowly pack his things and start moving out, one box at a time. And honestly, I started to feel excited. The idea of finally having the whole apartment to myself lit me up inside. But then came his last night in the apartment. I got home from work and stopped dead in my tracks. There he was, sitting on our couch, with Sierra. I blinked, confused. And he casually said that since it was his last night living there, he wanted to show Sierra where he'd been staying. Seriously? He brought his new girlfriend into my space, our home, without even asking, while knowing full well I'd be coming home. The audacity was unreal. Still, I didn't want to make a scene or embarrass anyone, especially her. She wasn't the one who owed me respect, he did. So I gave her a polite smile and said hello. But Sierra? She looked at me like I was something she stepped in and didn't say a single word back. Whatever. I figured she might have been misled by Logan, and I didn't need to take it personally. I headed to my room to change and unwind. Later, I went into the kitchen to cook myself some pasta, trying to keep things as normal as possible. While I was stirring the sauce, Sierra walked in to get a glass of water. She just stood there for a bit, watching me like I was on display. It was weird. I finally asked her if she needed something, but she just gave me that same smug look. I didn't have the energy for petty drama, so I turned my back and finished cooking. I grabbed my bowl and went back to my room to eat in peace. After dinner, as I was coming back down the stairs, I heard them talking. I paused without meaning to. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something in Sierra's voice made me freeze. She was laughing and telling Logan how lucky he was to have traded up from someone like me. My stomach dropped. Then I heard Logan laugh too, actually laugh, and agree with her. Then came the punch to the gut. Sierra asked why he had ever dated someone like me. And Logan, without a hint of shame, said he had only used me because I was naive enough to always pick up the tab on our dates. He bragged about how I helped him out during college and even covered more than half the rent for years, just so he could save money. I felt sick. I'd always suspected he might have taken advantage of me financially, but hearing him say it out loud like that, with pride, and it didn't stop there. They kept laughing, tearing apart our relationship, mocking me like I was some desperate loser. I wanted to cry right there, to storm in and scream at them both, but I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. So I tiptoed back upstairs, crawled into bed, and cried quietly into my pillow for the rest of the night. By morning, they were gone. Logan had taken the last of his things and officially moved out. Just like that, he was out of my life. I walked through the apartment that day in a daze. The silence felt different, lighter. I could breathe again. And once it hit me that he was really gone, I cried, but this time it was happy tears. I danced around the living room like an idiot and then scrubbed every corner of the place until it looked and felt completely mine. Over the next few weeks, I started to really enjoy living alone. I wasn't thinking about Logan or Sierra or anything they'd said. I was just free. But then, 2 months later, one of our mutual friends, who also worked with me, pulled me aside at the office. She told me Logan was getting married to Sierra. I blinked. That was fast. She showed me their engagement photos, and yeah, they looked happy. Or at least they looked like people pretending to be. I'll admit, for a moment, I felt this weird ache inside, not because I missed him, but because it stung realizing I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to him. But I also knew I would have never been happy with a guy like that. So I reminded myself that he did me a favor. Let him have Sierra. They deserved each other. That night when I got home, I opened my mailbox and froze. There it was, an actual wedding invitation from Logan and Sierra. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of accident, or maybe he'd invited me out of obligation. But then I opened it and saw a note scribbled inside. It read, "I want you to be at my wedding, so you can see the amazing life I'm about to have with Sierra." And, just like that, it all made sense. He hadn't invited me as a courtesy. He wanted to gloat. He wanted me there to see what he thought I missed out on, his shiny new life, his rich girlfriend, and whatever status came with it. I stared at the card for a long time. I didn't understand how someone could be so petty after everything I had done for him. All the help, the care, the patience, wasted. But then I felt something unexpected rise inside me, not sadness, not even anger. Just this deep urge to remind him that I was not the girl he used to walk all over. So I pulled out my phone, typed up an RSVP, and checked yes with a +1. As soon as I saw that wedding invitation and the cocky little message scribbled inside, I knew exactly what I needed to do. A plan started forming in my head, and I was set on making Logan regret ever trying to rub his new life in my face. I grabbed my laptop and started digging through Sierra's social media. Picture after picture, post after post, I scanned everything she had ever shared. Most of it was just typical rich girl stuff, travel, brunches, parties, but eventually I found gold. About 6 months ago, Sierra had posted about a breakup with her ex-boyfriend, Ethan. They had pictures going all the way back to high school. It was clear they'd been together for years. He wasn't just some casual fling. Without overthinking it, I sent Ethan a friend request. To my surprise, he accepted it. I shot him a message and was completely honest. I told him who I was, that I was Logan's ex, and that I had a pretty wild idea. I wanted to bring him as my +1 to Logan and Sierra's wedding. Ethan was confused at first, understandably. But I explained the whole situation, how Logan had used me, how Sierra and Logan mocked me behind my back, and how this wedding invite felt like one final slap in the face. That's when Ethan opened up. He told me that Sierra had cheated on him multiple times, and her final affair had been with Logan. I didn't know that. I mean, I figured she wasn't exactly innocent, but hearing it confirmed hit different. Ethan explained that Sierra always had a thing for older guys, so he wasn't even surprised when she announced she was suddenly in love with Logan while they were still together. Their breakup was ugly, and Ethan had cut her off completely, even though she tried to keep in touch under the pretense of staying friends. From the way he talked about her, I got the feeling he still wasn't totally over her. I opened up to him, too. I told Ethan everything, how I carried the weight in my relationship, how Logan mooched off me for years, how I'd cooked, cleaned, and paid the rent while being treated like I was nothing. And how, on his last night, he and Sierra laughed about using me. Ethan was shocked. He couldn't believe the things Logan had said. After hearing everything, he finally agreed to go with me. I could barely hide my excitement. I could already picture Logan and Sierra's faces when they saw me walk in with her ex-boyfriend on my arm. Wedding day came, and the second we stepped into the venue, I saw Logan's jaw drop. He immediately recognized Ethan. His eyes locked on us as we made our way to our assigned seats, pretending not to notice the panic in his face. He rushed over, leaning in close and hissing under his breath, "Why the hell would you bring him?" I smiled sweetly and shrugged. +1, remember? He couldn't make a scene, not with everyone watching. So he glared daggers at me and stormed off, walking back to the altar with his fake smile glued on. When it was time for the ceremony to start, everyone stood as Sierra came down the aisle in her white, floor-length gown, her dad walking her down. She looked like the picture of perfection. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Vows, rings, kisses, the whole thing. Then came the reception. Sierra must have changed into a second outfit, something a little flashier, because when she entered the hall again, she was wearing a new dress. That's when things got interesting. She hadn't noticed me or Ethan yet, but when her eyes finally landed on us, she stopped mid-step. Completely froze. She looked from me to Ethan and back again, visibly confused. Then she snapped at Ethan, "What are you doing here?" Before he could answer, I leaned in and said with a smile I invited him. "Just wanted to come show our support." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you two together now?" Ethan didn't say a word, because honestly, the question didn't even deserve a response. Sierra's face flushed red, and she looked ready to explode. Ethan calmly asked if they could talk in private. He didn't want to make a scene. She nodded stiffly and shot me a look that could kill before following him out of the hall. Meanwhile, Logan sat across the room, watching everything unfold like a hawk. He looked anxious, but he couldn't leave his spot. He had to pretend everything was still perfect. The party kept rolling, people drinking and dancing, but after about an hour, there was still no sign of Sierra. Guests were whispering, eyebrows raised. Even Sierra's dad started looking around, clearly worried. Eventually, he sent one of the bridesmaids to check on her. A few minutes later, the bridesmaid came rushing back, breathless and holding a piece of paper. She stood in the middle of the room and announced, in front of everyone, that Sierra was gone. She read the note aloud. Sierra had written that seeing Ethan brought up all her old feelings. That she couldn't go through with the marriage. That she'd made a huge mistake. The moment the bridesmaid read that note out loud, the entire room fell into stunned silence. Logan stood there, alone in front of everyone, completely humiliated and exposed. The same guy who thought he'd be parading around with his perfect life and trophy bride now looked like a deer in headlights, only angrier. Even I was caught off guard. Sure, I'd brought Ethan as my +1 to stir the pot a bit and get under Logan's skin, but I never expected things to blow up like this. I mean, I wanted petty, but this was nuclear. Logan looked like he was about to lose it. You could see it in his eyes, rage, shock, disbelief, all rolled into one. But he couldn't say or do much with all those eyes on him. Sierra's parents handled the situation as best as they could. They politely asked everyone to head home and apologized again and again for the unexpected turn of events. I stood there watching it all unfold, watching Logan, who once stood so proudly, now reduced to a broken, stunned man in a tux. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something, a mix of guilt and, satisfaction. Because the wedding that was supposed to be as grand, I won the breakup moment ended up being a full-blown train wreck. And the wreckage? That was on him. After I shared the story online, a lot of people reached out. Some cheered me on and said I did the right thing. Others told me I took it too far. So, here's the thing, no, I never meant to ruin anyone's wedding. That was never the goal. I didn't whisper anything to Ethan about causing drama, and I sure as hell didn't expect Sierra to ditch her own wedding. I only wanted to give Logan a little taste of his own medicine after all the years he made me feel small. That's it. I had nothing to do with Sierra's decision to leave, and I still don't know what exactly went down between her and Ethan in that private conversation. I did message Ethan later, just to ask what happened. A day passed, and then he replied. He sent a long, heartfelt message thanking me. He said being at that wedding gave him closure he didn't know he needed. He told me that, believe it or not, he and Sierra went on the honeymoon trip. Yes, the one she was supposed to take with Logan. He said they talked things out with her parents too, who had been understandably panicked after she disappeared from her own reception. Ethan said we'd meet soon to talk in person and clear the air. Meanwhile, Logan has been blowing up my phone since that night. Calls, texts, voice messages, nasty accusations. He's been blaming me for the disaster that was his wedding. I haven't responded to any of it. I know the truth. I had no part in Sierra and Ethan running away together. That was their choice, not mine. But then, this past weekend, Logan showed up. He knew I'd be home. I saw him through the peephole first, banging on the door and shouting that he needed to talk. I told him flat out through the door that he wasn't welcome and needed to leave. He wouldn't stop yelling, though, so I cracked the door open just enough to make it clear he wasn't stepping foot inside. If you've got something to say, I told him, say it from there. That's when he completely lost it. He started screaming that I'd destroyed his life. Apparently, he had already quit his job, assuming he'd never have to work again once he married into Sierra's wealthy family. He demanded to know why I brought Ethan to the wedding. By then, I was already done being polite. So I laid it all out for him. I told him I heard everything he said that last night he was at my apartment, the way he laughed with Sierra about using me for money, how I covered his rent and picked up the check on dates while he saved his own cash. His eyes widened. He didn't realize I had overheard it all. I told him I did it because I loved him, because I cared, but clearly, he never respected me. Even when he cheated on me, I didn't cause drama. I didn't interfere. I let him go. But when he invited me to his wedding just to show off, to gloat about upgrading his life, that's when I decided I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He tried to twist it around, yelling that Sierra leaving wasn't his fault and that I shouldn't punish him for the past. He even had the audacity to say I was too naive to see how he was using me and that it was on me for letting it happen. I just stared at him. The man was unbelievable. He kept ranting, saying Sierra was supposed to be his ticket out, that she was his way to finally have everything he ever wanted. Then he admitted it. He told me that he'd worked hard to charm her, to flirt, to win her over, and now I'd ruined everything. That was enough for me. I told him, plain and simple, that he had 10 seconds to get off my property or I was calling the police. He scoffed and said I wouldn't dare. So I pulled out my phone and held it up right in front of him, ready to dial. His expression changed instantly. He took a few steps back and said I was overreacting, that he was leaving. I shut the door in his face and locked it behind me, telling myself this would be the last time I ever saw or heard from him again. And it was. I blocked him everywhere, calls, texts, email, even social media. I told my family what happened just in case he tried pulling anything weird. After that blow-up at my doorstep, I knew I needed to take precautions. I decided I'd be changing the locks on my doors and installing a security camera right above the entrance, just in case Logan ever showed up again. If he did, I wanted solid proof of his behavior so I could report him without hesitation. Update: it's been about a month since my last post. Work's been hectic, so I haven't had much time to respond to the flood of messages from people asking the same question. Did you and Ethan ever meet again? Well, I've got good news, we finally did. Ethan invited me out to lunch last week, saying he wanted to talk. So I agreed. But when I showed up at the cafe, I froze for a second. Sierra was sitting next to him. My gut reaction? I braced myself. I thought she was about to stir up more drama, maybe confront me again. But to my surprise, she looked up, gave me a polite smile, and greeted me with warmth. I didn't know what her angle was, so I stayed cautious. Ethan quickly reassured me that she wasn't there to fight, she just wanted to apologize. Sierra nodded and genuinely apologized for how she had treated me at the wedding and before. I could tell she meant it. Then she began to open up and share her side of the story with Logan. She told me that Logan had always been overly friendly at work, showering her with compliments, giving her extra attention, and making a point of bonding during their long hours on the job. He painted a picture of himself as a miserable, misunderstood boyfriend stuck in a loveless relationship. He'd constantly complain about me, telling her he wished he had someone like her instead. At first, she just felt flattered. But over time, especially during a rough patch with Ethan, she let herself get swept up in Logan's charm. She admitted they hooked up once, while she was still dating Ethan. After that, Logan started pressuring her to break up with Ethan. He sent her nonstop texts, calling her his dream girl and talking about the future they could have together. Eventually, she gave in. She ended things with Ethan and decided to give Logan a real shot, despite the red flags and the age gap. Sierra went on to say that when she met me, she felt insecure. She said seeing how independent I was, how I stood on my own 2 feet, made her feel threatened. She'd never met a woman who didn't need a man to hold her up, and that scared her. That was why she acted the way she did. She was jealous. She apologized for everything, and I could see the remorse in her eyes. I appreciated her honesty, so I shared a little bit of my own story, how hard I'd worked to get where I was in my career, how much I had sacrificed over the years. She listened quietly, nodding, her expression soft. I eventually asked the question that had been on my mind. What exactly happened at the wedding? That's when Sierra explained everything. She said when she saw Ethan walk into the ceremony with me, her heart dropped. Seeing him again made her realize just how much she still loved him and how she had never felt anything close to that for Logan. The connection she had with Ethan wasn't something she could fake. They talked in private during the reception, and both admitted they still had feelings for each other. That was all it took. Sierra wrote the note, left it with a bridesmaid, and walked out of her own wedding to be with him. Since then, they've been together. According to both of them, things have been going well. Sierra told me she'd spoken to her parents too. They were furious at first, but eventually, they came around and decided to support her. She also mentioned she was filing for an annulment from Logan soon. I won't lie, part of me still felt uneasy. Everything had escalated way beyond what I ever planned or expected. But at the same time, I could see it. Sierra and Ethan were truly happy together. And as chaotic as the road had been, they'd somehow found their way back to each other. We finished lunch, talked for a little while longer, then went our separate ways. Since then, I haven't really kept in touch with either of them, and to be honest, I'd rather keep it that way. I've had enough of the drama. My focus now is on healing, working hard, and building a life I'm proud of. As for Logan, I don't know what he's up to. And honestly, I don't care. I just hope one day he learns to stop chasing women for what they can give him, and starts becoming someone worth staying for.